It started in the corner of that little cafe by the bookstore, not the big tables by the windows. No, she always chose the smaller one near the back, the one where the light barely reached. I'd seen her there before, once or twice, but never thought much of it. That morning, I was half asleep, clutching my coffee, when she looked up and caught me staring. Not with annoyance, though. That was what surprised me. It was a look that paused just long enough to feel like acknowledgement. When she spoke, it was nothing, just a soft, polite, "Do you come here often?" But she folded the napkin in her hand as she said it, edges pressed so neatly together that I couldn't stop watching. My words fumbled. Yeah? Sometimes. You." She smiled, not answering right away. Instead, she brushed the crease of the napkin flat with her finger. "I like the tea here," she finally said. Nothing special, but dependable. Something about the way she said dependable stuck with me. She asked if I wanted to join her. I almost said no. I wasn't sure if I should, but her chair scraped softly across the floor, angled just enough to make space. I sat down before I could talk myself out of it. We didn't say much. She stirred her tea slowly, as though the spoon had nowhere else to be. I kept glancing at her hands, the way they rested on the porcelain cup, the faint tremor in her thumb when she set it down. "You always drink coffee?" she asked suddenly. I nodded. "Habit." She tilted her head. "Not much comfort in habits, is there?" I didn't know how to answer that. The silence after stretched longer than it should have, but she didn't seem bothered. She just looked down at her tea, then back at me, like she was waiting for something I hadn't figured out yet. When she laughed, soft, almost apologetic, it caught me off guard. "Sorry, I didn't mean to sound dramatic." I shook my head. "It's fine." And it was. More than fine. Her laugh stayed with me, light, but weighted. After that, the words came easier. We talked about the bookstore, about how the owner never updated the display. She teased me for not finishing the stack of novels I'd bought weeks ago. I teased her back about the notebook she carried, pages worn at the edges, though she didn't tell me what was in it. But it wasn't the words that mattered. It was the pauses, the moments when her eyes lingered on mine a little too long, or when she adjusted her scarf even though it wasn't slipping. Little, ordinary things that shouldn't mean anything, but somehow did. When she poured more tea, she held the pot with a steadiness that felt deliberate. She said, "It's just tea, nothing more." But the way her hand hovered over my cup, the faint hesitation before the liquid touched porcelain, made my chest tighten. I laughed it off, but inside, something shifted. Later, I walked home with her voice replaying in my head. I pulled out my phone twice, thumbs hovering over her number, though I'd never asked for it. Still, I thought about what I'd say if I had it. I reached my apartment, set the phone down, then picked it up again. My chest felt restless. And then it buzzed. A message. Unknown number. Just 5 words. "Same time tomorrow?" I stared at the screen, not moving, not breathing, as if the whole world had gone quiet, waiting for me to answer. The next day, she was already there when I arrived. Same table, same chair. A small notebook rested beside her cup, closed but within reach. She glanced up as I walked in, and there it was again, that pause, like she'd been expecting me. "You're early," she said, lips curving slightly. I shrugged, sitting down across from her. Couldn't sleep much. She didn't press. Instead, she slid the teapot toward me. I poured for myself, careful, like matching her unspoken rhythm from yesterday. The silence wasn't heavy. It was precise, as though both of us were choosing words before they had the chance to scatter. She broke it first. "You remind me of my son, a little." The sentence landed strangely. My throat tightened before I even thought about why. She must have seen my face shift, because she added quickly, not in a bad way. "Just the way you sit. Always on the edge of the chair, like you're ready to leave." I exhaled, forced a small smile. "Maybe I am." She studied me for a moment. "But you don't." Her words lingered, and I found myself looking at the notebook instead of her eyes. The leather was worn, corners fraying, like it had been carried through years. I wanted to ask about it, but didn't. Instead, I asked, "Do you always come here alone?" She stirred her tea. The spoon clinked softly against porcelain, once, twice, before she stopped. "Mostly. I like quiet places." She hesitated, then, "After the divorce, I learned to." There was no flourish in how she said it, just the kind of truth that comes out when you don't expect to say it. I nodded, unsure if I should respond. My chest felt tight. like I'd stumbled into something I hadn't been meant to hear. But she didn't look regretful. She just sipped her tea, gaze turned slightly toward the window, as though she was giving me time to catch up. The air shifted. I became aware of the small distance between our cups, the shared table holding two lives that probably weren't meant to overlap. "You're quiet today?" she said finally. I rubbed at the edge of my cup, just thinking. About. The question was light, but it pressed against me. I imagined what I could say, that I thought about her hands folding napkins, the way her laugh had stayed with me longer than it should. Instead, I just said, "Nothing important." She smiled at that, soft and knowing, as if she'd heard the words I didn't speak. We sat in silence again. This time it wasn't neat or easy. It was a silence that carried everything unsaid. I reached for the teapot at the same moment she did. Our fingers brushed, barely, but enough to freeze both of us. Her hand withdrew first. She laughed quietly, but not unkindly. "Careful, you'll burn yourself." I wanted to tell her it wasn't the tea that burned. Instead, I held her gaze for one beat too long. She didn't look away. Later, walking home, I kept replaying that brief touch, the way her voice softened at the edges when she warned me. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. By the third afternoon, the cafe felt different. Or maybe I did. She was already seated, coat draped neatly over the chair beside her. A space left open, not for anyone, not really, but I noticed it anyway. When I sat down, she glanced at me, almost like she'd been caught. "You're making a habit of this," she said. "Guess so." Her cup was already half empty. She pushed the teapot toward me, but her hand hesitated midway, hovering just a fraction too long before letting go. I poured. Steam rose between us, and in that blur, I realized how close we were sitting. Not touching, but the distance felt thinner somehow. She asked me about work, small things. I answered, though the words felt like distractions. Her gaze was steady, too steady, and every time I looked away, I wanted to look back. Then, her phone buzzed. The sound was sharper than it should have been. She flipped it over quickly, screen down. "Sorry," she murmured. No explanation. I pretended not to notice, but the silence stretched. My chest tightened with questions I couldn't ask. Finally, she exhaled softly, as if releasing something. "You remind me of a time when, I don't know, when things felt simpler." Her voice trailed off, and she took a sip, not meeting my eyes. I wanted to ask what she meant. I wanted to tell her I thought about her voice at night, about her hands brushing mine over the teapot. But instead, I nodded. "I get that." The words sounded small, clumsy. For a moment, it felt like something might slip through the cracks between us, until the bell over the cafe door chimed. I turned, and there, walking in, was someone I recognized, her son. He didn't see me right away, just spotted her first. His face lit up. "Mom." She froze. Just a flicker, but I saw it. She turned slightly in her chair, as though she could fold herself smaller. My pulse hammered. Her son glanced between us, confusion forming, but only for a second. "Didn't know you'd be here." She smiled, too quickly. "Just tea." Her words carried a weight only I seemed to hear. He nodded, distracted, already moving toward the counter. But the air had changed. The space between us wasn't thin anymore. It was crowded, heavy, impossible. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her fingers worried at the edge of her napkin, folding, unfolding. I cleared my throat. "Maybe I should—" "No," she cut in, quietly but firm. Then softer, almost to herself. "Not yet." The silence after that felt like standing on the edge of something steep. When her son left with his drink, she finally looked back at me. And for a moment, her eyes softened in a way I'd never seen before. I opened my mouth. Words caught, half-formed. She leaned in, just slightly, breath close enough to blur mine. But then she pulled back, fingers tightening around her cup. "It's late," she whispered. And that was all. We didn't meet at the cafe this time. She suggested a walk instead, said she needed air. The evening was cool, the kind of cool that makes every word visible in your breath. We walked side by side down the quieter streets, not touching, not speaking much. Just the sound of our steps, uneven, sometimes falling into rhythm, sometimes not. She asked about my week. I answered lightly. "Work. A movie I didn't finish." She nodded, distracted. Finally, I asked, "And you?" She exhaled through her nose, a quiet laugh with no humor in it. "I saw my ex-husband yesterday." The words felt heavier than the air around us. Just papers, she added quickly. Nothing dramatic. Still, I didn't know what to say, so I shoved my hands into my pockets. She looked ahead, shoulders a little straighter than usual, as if holding something in place. We reached a bench by the park. She sat first, brushing her coat beneath her. I sat beside her, not too close, not too far. The silence pressed. After a while, she spoke again. He asked if I was seeing anyone. The pause was long enough that I knew she wanted me to ask. My throat tightened. And what did you say? She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. I told him no. Her fingers traced the wooden slats of the bench. I kept my gaze forward, watching the empty swings in the playground move slightly with the wind. I shouldn't even be here, she said suddenly. The words cracked open the air between us. I turned. Why? Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. Because you're young. Too young. And me. She shook her head, voice trailing off. I felt heat rise in my chest. So what? You think I don't know what I'm doing? She blinked, startled. For a moment, neither of us breathed. She stopped herself, pressing her lips together. Her hand tightened on the bench. This is dangerous. I almost laughed, but the sound caught. It's tea. Walks. Talking. Why does it feel like more than that? Her shoulders slumped, just slightly. Because it is. The words landed and stayed there, between us, unclaimed. I wanted to tell her everything. That I thought about her more than I should. That the sound of her laugh carried me through empty nights. Instead, I said, then what do we do? She didn't answer right away. Just breathed out, slow, like the question itself was too much to hold. Her hand shifted, brushing against mine on the bench. Not holding, just a graze, light enough to be excused. But neither of us moved away. My heart beat, so loud I was sure she could hear it. She turned her head then, finally meeting my eyes fully, without retreat. There was no smile this time, no quick deflection. Just the raw truth of her face, open and unguarded. I leaned in, not enough, but almost. Her breath caught. And then she whispered, low, as if to herself. What happens if we can't stop? The cafe felt different when I walked in that morning. Same table in the corner. Same chair. But she wasn't there. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. The teapot sat untouched at a nearby table, another customer's hand curled around it. She hadn't shown. I texted. Nothing. Called. Nothing. I stared at my phone longer than I wanted to admit, thumbs hovering over the screen, heart pulsing in a way I couldn't name. By the afternoon, she finally appeared, but everything was shifted. Distance wrapped around her like a coat she had pulled too tight. No smile, no glance, no hint of the softness that had drawn me in. You've been busy? I asked, trying to sound casual. She looked up briefly, eyes distant. Life, she said. The word fell flat, hollow, like it had been rehearsed. I sat down anyway, trying to bridge the space. Everything okay? Her fingers played with the edge of her cup, not meeting mine. I've been thinking. And that was it. That was all I got. Thinking. No explanations, no context. Days passed like this. I stopped showing up. Not out of anger, but because the air had changed. Each morning, I expected to see her, the weight of anticipation pressing me forward, but only emptiness greeted me. I imagined all the things she might be dealing with, her ex-husband visiting, her son needing her, some burden I hadn't seen. And still, my thoughts spiraled into guilt, wondering if I'd asked too much by simply existing near her. Then I saw her briefly at the bookstore. She glanced at me, a flicker of recognition, and I felt it. The same pull, the same ache. But she kept walking, notebook clutched to her chest, a shield I couldn't breach. I sent a message I never pressed send. I keep thinking about you. About tea. About the bench. And just like that, the phone sat in my hand, unread, unsent. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I sat at the cafe days later, empty cup in front of me, staring at the door whenever it swung. The bell rang. Someone entered. Not her. Just another stranger, another sip of someone else's tea. I wondered if she thought of me at all. If she remembered the way our fingers brushed, the unfinished words hanging between us, the silence that said more than any confession could. A chair remained empty across from me. Her chair. The table set for two that had no one to fill it. And I realized, I didn't know if she'd come back, or if I'd even want her to. The door opened again. The breeze stirred the napkin at her empty seat. I reached for it, paused, and then I let it lie. I found her in the kitchen of her apartment. Not by invitation, not by plan, just a door left ajar, the faint smell of tea and something else, her presence filling the small space. She was stirring sugar into her cup when I stepped in. For a moment, we didn't speak. The spoon clinked softly against porcelain. Steam curled up in lazy spirals, catching the light from the window. "Hi," I said finally. She looked up, eyes narrowing slightly, then softened. "You shouldn't be here." "I know." I moved closer anyway, careful, measured. But I had to. My words stopped, caught somewhere between caution and need. She set the spoon down. "You're reckless." "Maybe," I admitted. "But I can't not do this. Not come." Her fingers traced the rim of her cup, the tiniest movements betraying the tension she carried. "You know what this is. How it complicates things." I nodded. "I know. And I don't care." Her laugh was short, dry. "You don't care? That's something." "I do care," I said. "I care too much to stay silent. Too much to step back." She looked down, and the pause stretched. I watched her shoulders tense, then relax, the quiet weight of fear in her posture. I wanted to tell her everything. The ache in the empty cafe, the unsent messages, the brush of her fingers on the bench. But instead, I just stood there, hands lightly brushing against the counter. Finally, she spoke, soft, barely above a whisper. "I'm scared." "Me too," I admitted. Her gaze flicked to mine. The words hung between us like smoke, fragile, dangerous, beautiful. I stepped closer, closer than I should have. Not pressing, not demanding, just presence. Her hand moved slightly, hovering near mine. I didn't reach for it. She did. Fingers touched. Gentle, timid. Enough. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The room was small, still, ordinary, but it held everything we'd been holding back. "I don't want to hurt you," she whispered. "You won't," I said. "Not like this." A quiet smile curved her lips. A real one this time. The kind that carries relief, acknowledgement, and something like trust. We stayed that way for a while. Fingers intertwined, steam rising from two half-empty cups, words unnecessary. The world outside, ex-husband, son, expectations, faded to the edges. Finally, she exhaled and murmured, almost to herself, "Okay." And I said the same. Okay. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a declaration. Just two people, real, fragile, choosing to exist in the same space without pretense. And for now, it was enough. Months passed, and the cafe became a rhythm. Not every day, not always planned, but familiar. I'd arrive around 8:47 a.m., the steam of my black coffee curling upward, and she'd be there, notebook at the same corner table. Sometimes tea, sometimes nothing at all. We spoke less, in the sense of catching up. Words felt unnecessary. The pauses carried more weight than sentences ever could. I noticed the small things, the way she stirred slowly, the tremor in her thumb when she laughed softly, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear even when no one was watching. We kept the bench near the park, too. Not because of what had almost happened, but because it was ours. We didn't talk about the edge of emotions days, didn't name the risk or the guilt. We just sat sometimes, sharing the quiet like a language only we understood. One morning, she arrived before me. I found her sitting there, sipping tea, notebook closed. She looked up, eyes soft, and I realized she had learned my rhythm, the times I arrived, the way I held my cup. I poured myself coffee and joined her. For a moment, the world narrowed to two cups, two hands, the faint warmth of shared space. "Morning," she said quietly. "Morning," I replied. The words carried everything we didn't have to say. Life still happened around us. Work, errands, calls from her son, papers and deadlines. But we learned the quiet negotiation of proximity. Not clinging, not demanding, just existing side by side in the same light, comfortable in the hum of the ordinary. I caught her folding a napkin once, careful, precise, and smiled. Same as the first morning. I realized it wasn't about the folding itself. It was about noticing, being seen in the small gestures that nobody else watched. Sometimes we teased. Sometimes we didn't speak for long stretches. I'd leave, she'd leave, and the world outside continued, indifferent. But there was a constant undercurrent, understood without words. One day, I reached for the teapot. She reached at the same time. Fingers brushed lightly, and we just let it rest there. Not a confession, not a declaration, just acknowledgement. As I walked home that evening, I thought about the months behind us, the near crossings, the unsent messages, the silent adjustments. Everything that might have destroyed us became the quiet architecture of our connection. And in that gentle understanding, I realized the truth. This wasn't about grand gestures or confessions. It was about noticing her hands, her pauses, her rhythm, about showing up and being seen. I smiled, softly, thinking of her folding that napkin once more, of black coffee at 8:47 a.m., and the bench that waited patiently through all the seasons. No words needed, just quiet, earned presence. And I understood, something only we ever could. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?